Man, you know what's wild when you really sit back and think about Michael Jackson, like really think about him, not just the music videos, the glitter glove, the moonwalk, but the person behind that, the guy who spent his whole life surrounded by noise. You start realizing that dude was on a completely different frequency. Everyone saw the fame, the chaos, the controversies, but under all that, there was this restless soul, this dude who was looking for peace. You could feel it in the way he talked, the way he'd pause mid-interview, like he was holding something heavier than words. That's not just showbiz burnout, man. That's a deep spiritual hunger. He had everything, right? The money, the global love, private jets, palaces, Neverland, and still you'd catch him saying stuff like, I just want peace. How many billionaires or rock stars say that and actually mean it? And I think that's where it gets interesting. Because when someone's been to the absolute top, when they've literally seen every side of human nature, fame, greed, love, betrayal, they start searching for something that can't be bought. That's what it was with him. You can tell by his body language in those old interviews, he wasn't chasing applause anymore, he was chasing calm. He was looking for truth. And the more I've looked into it, man, it's crazy how quietly he started surrounding himself with people who had that calm, that inner peace. A few of them were Muslims, some were spiritual teachers, some were just regular people who didn't care who Michael Jackson was, and that's exactly what he needed. There are these stories, whispers really, about how he used to ask deep questions about faith, like not in a Hollywood self-help way, but real questions. Stuff like, why does the world feel so cold when there's so much beauty in it? Or what does it mean to surrender? That word, surrender, you hear that a lot in Islam. It's literally what the name means, submission to God. And I think that hit him on a different level, because imagine being someone like him, right? The most famous man on earth, yet constantly under pressure to control everything. Your image, your sound, your body, your narrative, and then you find out there's this faith that says stop controlling, let go, surrender. That must have felt like oxygen to him. The media never talked about it much, obviously. They never want to highlight when someone from their own pop culture circle starts questioning the system. Because Michael Jackson questioning the world he helped build, that's dangerous. That's like Neo waking up in the Matrix. You can't have that. But behind the scenes, he was listening, learning. Friends close to him said he found something deeply soothing in hearing the Quran being recited. Think about that for a second. The guy whose life was built on beats, rhythm, and sound suddenly sitting quietly, listening to words that weren't even in his language, and feeling peace. That tells you how powerful that connection was. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It wasn't like he was trying to rebrand or shock people. It was personal. You could tell he didn't want cameras around that part of his life. He wasn't performing anymore. He was reflecting. He was asking, what happens when the lights go out, when the show's over, when the crowd's gone? And I think Islam's concept of peace through surrender, of aligning your will with something higher, it resonated with him. He'd been trying to find peace through control his entire life, and it never worked. The fame, the money, the cosmetic perfection, it all backfired. So he started looking inward. And in that inward journey, he started brushing up against the truth that billions of people already live by, that real peace isn't external. It's not in applause or validation. It's in submission. When you hear about him spending time with Yusuf Islam, Cat Stevens, it makes sense. Yusuf walked away from fame after finding Islam. He found his peace and faith. And I think that inspired Michael more than people realize. Not necessarily to convert, but to understand. To sit down with people who weren't trying to sell him anything. Just people who'd found stillness. Because that's what he was missing. Stillness. The dude had spent 40 years dancing, and now he wanted silence. He wanted meaning, and when you're at that level of stardom, silence is terrifying. Because when it's quiet, you start hearing your own thoughts again. And Michael's thoughts must have been heavy, man. You could see it in his eyes, the guilt, the exhaustion, the loneliness. That's why his spiritual curiosity was so raw. It wasn't some trend or a celebrity phase. It was survival. He was looking for something to save him from himself. And he was looking in places most people never dare to look, places beyond culture, beyond fame, beyond fear. The crazy thing about guys like Michael is that they live in this paradox. They're worshipped like gods, but they're starving for something divine. It's like everyone's bowing down to them, buying their records, chanting their name, but inside, they're looking for something real to bow to. That's the irony, right? You become the biggest thing in the world, and then you realize there's still something missing, something sacred that the cameras can't catch. And I think that's where his fascination with faith started really kicking in. Not religion as in labels, but faith as in truth. He'd seen what happens when humans start treating fame like a religion, when money, power, and trends become gods. And he knew it was all hollow. I think he saw that people were losing their souls in the chase. He was living proof, like he had every material thing you could imagine, and yet his interviews sounded like the words of a monk, not a millionaire. He talked about innocence, purity, compassion. He wanted to heal the world, not sell it. And that's what makes his connection to Islam so fascinating, because Islam isn't just about rituals, it's about grounding. It's about finding balance in a world that constantly tries to pull you apart. You wake up, you pray, you remember there's something bigger than you. For someone like Michael, who was constantly being told he was the biggest thing in the world, that concept must have been revolutionary. You can imagine the kind of peace that must have given him to sit with people who didn't treat him like a product. People who said, "Brother, we're all the same in front of God." That's a sentence that can break a man down in the best way possible. Because if you've been idolized your whole life, the idea that you're just human again can feel like freedom. That's why he kept that part of his life quiet. He didn't want it branded. He didn't want religion to become another accessory like a jacket or a headline. He was protecting something sacred, something that was his alone. And people close to him said he'd ask these deep, almost childlike questions. Stuff like, why do Muslims pray 5 times a day? Why do they wash before prayer? You could tell he was trying to understand not just the rules, but the rhythm behind them, the discipline, the structure, because Michael was all about rhythm. His life was built on beats and timing, and Islam has that same heartbeat, the call to prayer, the repetition, the flow of day and night around faith. I think that symmetry spoke to him. It's like he saw spirituality as music, and Islam had that perfect tempo of peace. It's also wild to think about how much he must have resonated with the message of humility. In Islam, arrogance is seen as one of the biggest downfalls. And here was Michael Jackson, this guy who'd seen how ego can destroy people. The media built him up, tore him down, and built him up again, like a roller coaster powered by lies and obsession. He knew the poison of pride. He knew how fame isolates you. So when he hear about a way of life that says, remove your ego, connect to something greater, that must have hit him deep. You look back at his later interviews, his tone softened, his words started carrying more patience, more introspection. He wasn't talking about topping charts anymore. He was talking about healing, love, peace. He was already walking towards something bigger, even if he didn't label it. It's like he was halfway to surrender without even realizing it. And man, I think about how much courage that must have taken. Because for a Western celebrity to even mention Islam, especially back then, was like walking into a firestorm. The way he started talking about love, it wasn't romantic love anymore, it was universal, selfless. He was talking about healing hearts, healing the planet, forgiving, uniting. Those aren't lyrics from a pop star chasing charts. Those are prayers from a soul trying to reach peace. You listen to Earth Song, Heal the World, Man in the Mirror. Those tracks sound like confessions. They sound like someone who's seen too much and finally wants to reconnect with the Creator. He wasn't preaching, he was yearning. There's a difference. Preaching comes from pride, yearning comes from pain. And I think that pain is what pushed him toward faith. Islam teaches patience through trials, finding beauty in suffering, understanding that pain is part of the test. Imagine how much that must have resonated with him, because here's a man who was ridiculed, accused, torn apart by tabloids, betrayed by people he trusted, and still, he was out there talking about forgiveness and love. That's not weakness, that's strength. That's someone who's learning what surrender really means. There are stories of him asking his friends about how Muslims see the afterlife, about how death isn't the end, but a return. He wanted to understand what peace feels like when you're done fighting the world. That right there says everything. Most celebrities his level spend their last days trying to prove something. He was trying to understand something. He was preparing for something beyond all of it. That's spiritual maturity, man. That's awareness. And when people talk about how Islam influenced him, I don't think it's about a label or conversion. It's about the journey, the humility it takes to say, I don't have it all figured out. I need to learn. That's what makes someone truly human again. And Michael, after everything he'd been through, the surgeries, the lawsuits, the fame, the loneliness, he just wanted to be human again, to pray, to breathe, to exist without cameras, without pressure. He wanted that simplicity. And that's what Islam offers, simplicity. It strips everything down to one truth. There's God, and there's you. No middleman, no stage, no performance, just sincerity. I think that's what touched him the most. Because he'd spent his whole life performing for people. Maybe, for once, he wanted to do something just for God. something pure, unseen, unedited. That's why his spiritual curiosity wasn't just about Islam, it was about freedom. The kind of freedom no fame could buy. You can sense that kind of energy from people who've tasted everything life can offer and still feel empty. They start searching inward. They start noticing beauty and simplicity. They crave prayer. They crave stillness. They crave silence, because in silence they hear something sacred. And I think Michael heard that. I think he felt that stillness that only comes when you realize the world's applause is temporary. But the truth, that's eternal. You know, when you look back at the whole arc of his life, it almost feels like a movie, man. The rise, the chaos, the loneliness, the search. But underneath all the spectacle, there was this quiet evolution happening. The world was watching a pop icon, but what they didn't see was a soul waking up. And that's the part that gets me every time, because it's like he was trying to tell us something, not with headlines or press conferences, but through the little cracks in his words, through the softness in his eyes when he talked about peace. He was trying to say there's something more than all of this. And if you listen close, you can feel it. He was hinting at surrender. You can't fake that. There's this calm that comes when someone starts letting go of control. He'd lived decades being controlled, managed, manipulated, judged. But near the end, you start hearing a different tone, almost like he'd made peace with the storm. And maybe that's what Islam was giving him in those quiet moments, not rules, not rituals, but perspective. The realization that peace isn't out there, it's inside you, and it starts when you stop running. It's wild how life works. Because here's this man who spent his whole career running toward the spotlight, and at the end he was running away from it, chasing something invisible, something sacred. He wasn't talking about money or fame anymore. He was talking about truth, about humanity, about love that doesn't fade when the music stops. That's the language of the soul, and you can't learn that in Hollywood. You can only learn that through pain, through searching, through surrender. What makes it so powerful is that he didn't go around announcing his journey. He didn't make it a brand or a PR moment. He kept it private. That's how you know it was real. He wasn't chasing followers, he was chasing peace. And there's this deep respect I have for that, for the humility it takes to look at your whole empire and still say, none of this matters if my heart isn't at peace. That's the kind of realization that shakes a person to the core, and it makes you think, maybe his curiosity about Islam wasn't some random detour. Maybe it was part of his destiny. Maybe that's why his story feels unfinished, because it wasn't meant to end with music, it was meant to end with meaning. When people talk about how he seemed prophetic, how his words about love and truth still echo today, I think that's what they're feeling. That quiet faith he carried inside him started to speak louder than all the noise around him. There's something universal about that, like every human being, no matter how rich or famous, hits that moment where they start asking, who am I really? Why am I here? And when you strip away the lights, the cameras, the awards, it's just you and God. That's where every journey leads. And that's what makes his story so relatable. Because even though he was this global superstar, he was asking the same questions we all ask when we're alone at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it all means. I think that's why people still feel connected to him. Because beyond all the myths, there was truth. A man trying to find peace. A man looking beyond the surface, reaching towards something eternal. And maybe that's the message he left behind without ever saying it out loud, that fame fades, power fades, but truth doesn't. That the heart, when it finally gets tired of the world, starts searching for the one who made it. And that's where his journey quietly pointed, towards something higher, something timeless. You can call it faith, you can call it surrender, you can call it peace, but whatever it was, it changed him. You can feel it in the silence between his words, in the peace that seemed to follow him even when the world wouldn't let him rest. That's what makes his story hit deeper now than ever. Because, in the end, the king of pop wasn't chasing a crown anymore. He was chasing peace, and for a moment I think he found it